Hey there, so this is heads or tails, but the coins that I've picked are actually ancient. It's an ancient coin with a head on one side and a bird on the other, so I've renamed mine to heads or birds. So our algorithm will be that the user is going to make a choice, and they'll make a choice based on clicking a picture or a button or a picture on a button, and after they make their choice, the coin will get flipped. We'll show the proper face and show the winner and update our stats. So to start with, we need something to click on. So you can add picture boxes or buttons. I'm going to go with a button. Make sure that you name your button properly. So BTN, this will be heads. And I don't need a text. I'm going to import a picture. Choose image, and I've already gone into Photoshop and created my coin. Once you do that, don't forget, oh, that's not going to work for us because the picture is bigger than the button. Your choice would be to go into Photoshop and resize your picture to match your button size. So I'm just going to go ahead and use a picture box and make life easier for now. So it'll be pick heads, no text, import my picture. Well, it'll already be imported. Heads. And don't forget to set your size mode to stretch, and then you can make it fit your coin. So that's my heads. And I'll do the same for tails. And there's my bird, which is my tails. Okay, if you can now, you can add in labels to keep track of some of your statistics down below, and you're going to need a label to display the winner. So this could be my winner label, so LBL winner. And for now, I'll just put some text in there for fun. And you can change your font and all that. And you can have other labels for your statistics. I just copied and pasted that one. So this will be LBL player wins. And I'll copy that one. Computer wins. And you could do some statistic gathering on how many heads were rolled. Use meaningful names. Don't just abbreviate everything. Makes it difficult to decode your text later. Just going to add in a 0 in here. You could have a separate label to actually show the scores, but then your projects start getting with too many controls on them, and we can simply do concatenation to show the information in a single label here. The next thing I want to do is throw a tool tip on here, something we need to practice. So add a tooltip from your toolbox, and it shows up in your component tree. And then what we'll do is we'll choose the coins one at a time, and over in your properties it says tooltip on tooltip 1, and what you want to type here is the text that would show up, helper text, when the user mouses over this coin. So click for heads, and I'll make that capitalized. I'll choose the other coin. Click for tails. And I think I'll change this back to tails. So how that works then is if you run it and you hover over the coin, you get a tooltip help popping up. Okay, so now we're ready to code something here. Right now we just have our interface designed, which is your first step. Maybe your algorithm should be your first step. And this is the algorithm that we came up with in class. And that is that the first thing that will happen when we run the program is that the user is going to click either the head or the tail. When that happens, we will flip the coin. How do we do that? We find a random number between 0 and 1, and we're going to use R&D times 2 for that. Okay, your actual formula is high minus low plus 1, and that's all times R&D, and then you add your low, and when you substitute in 0 and 1, you find out that it's simply times 2. So once you have your random number, we'll show the proper face of the resulting coin flip, and we will use an if statement to determine if it's a head or a tail. 0 is heads, 1 is tails. We'll show the winner depending on what we clicked, and we'll update our stats. So that's our algorithm. So we'll start with coding the heads. Now, to keep track of the stats, we've already decided that we need some global variables here. And they have to be global because when we code tails, which apparently I didn't name, so I better fix that. No, I did. Okay, if you double click it before you name it, you have to go and delete that method stub, or it's the easiest to delete it and then put it back in. Since we have two methods that will affect our statistics, those variables should be global. Global variables should be declared with the keyword private, and it's best if you get some sort of programming standard, so we're going to go with an underscore. So we need to keep track of the player wins. Notice the camel case notation, and it's an integer. And the computer wins, and we will have the total number of heads tossed and the total number of tails tossed. Remember that your variable name should be meaningful, not abbreviated so that people can't understand what you're saying. Should add comments in here too. And your name, any other comments you want to put. And to help the reader out, it wouldn't hurt if you put dividing lines in your code, because these lovely gray lines that you see here in your screen don't show up when you print. Okay, so for coding of the heads, we need to find a random number that represents the coin flip. So we've clicked a head. The user's chosen a head. So we need a variable to hold the resulting toss. So we're going to declare it with dim, because we're going to get a new value every time we click heads, and this will be a dim result, I guess, or a toss. We could say toss as an integer. Toss is a good name. So now toss has to equal R&D times 2. And that goes back to what we talked about in the algorithm. Okay, so this will give us the number, if I want to comment this, will give us either a 0 or a 1, never a 2. Okay, upon discussion, we've decided that if we click the head, we want the tail to disappear briefly. So we're going to say that pick tails dot visible equals false. Make, well, I guess that's obvious, make tails go away. Alright, so when we pick the heads, the tails will go away. So if we run this, and it works. Okay, that's all good. We'll have to figure out how to make it come back in a minute. Now we need to decide if we won or not. To simulate this game the best we can, we've decided that we're going to show the user the result of the coin toss. So we're going to put another picture box here, a little bit bigger, because this will be the actual coin toss. And I'll set this to stretch image. So this will be pick toss. I'm calling mine pick toss. So right now it has nothing in it. So when do I show a picture there? Yeah, after we know this, right? Okay, so actually I'm going to move this down just because it makes more sense for it to be down here. So the first thing I did was I made the other coin go away. Now I know that I have got some toss result, and I need to show whether it was a head or a tail. So how do I do that? If toss is equal to 0, then pick toss dot image equals my dot resources dot. If it's a 0, it's a, what did we decide? Heads. So that's something you should put in the comment here, up here, maybe even at the very top here. Comment 0 is for heads, 1. You might remember that while you're writing this code, but in 6 months you might forget. Okay, now what I can do is I could write another if and say if the toss is equal to 0, then, but can you think of an easier way to get the other one to show up? Well, let's just do it this way and then we'll do it different on the other code. So then pick toss dot image equals the bird. So if I run this and I click tails and I don't get it to show up. Forgot to change that to a 1. So run it, and there we go. And again, your comment should go here. Toss was tails. And then here you should say toss was heads. Learn to comment your code while you're writing it, not when it's all done. Comment while you're writing. Run it again. Next, we decided in our algorithm, which is here, we've done this. Now we need to show the winner. And that will be with an if. Okay, so before I go any further, I just want to talk about the code that's here. And we're on the show winner section. And so if the toss is a 0, that means that we tossed a head. And we've clicked on heads, because that's the code that we're in. We win. So if the player wins, then we need to update our winning statistics right here. And if we change the number of player wins, then we need to update that label that goes with it. We don't need to update all the other labels. Okay, so we don't need to update all the labels. We just need to update the one that we changed. So this is all good, and this will work totally fine. However, we already have an if toss equals 0 up here. So putting it down here again is slightly redundant. So I'm going to cut this text out of here, this code, And I'm going to paste it up here, so I'm keeping it all together nice and tidy. So if the toss was a heads, and I have clicked on heads, show the heads picture, update the number of times that I won, because I just won, and change that. Okay, this is invisible. This happens behind the scenes. This is what we see. So you can remove that, and here you can show the winner. Okay, so the next thing you would do is show the loser. When do you lose? Well, whoops, didn't mean to do that. I clicked heads. So I lose if the toss is tails. So down here in this if toss equals 1, you will show the loser. So the code is very similar. This time the computer won, so we update the variable and we show the variable in our label. This ampersand is how we concatenate the variable to our string. Okay, concatenation, and that's how we get away with just having one label on our form instead of two. So the other thing left to do is, if you look at our form, we also have a heads rolled. We're keeping track. So basically here, if the toss is a head, we also need to say that heads, num heads is equal to num heads plus 1. And if the toss was a tails, then num tails also increments. And if you change those variables, you're going to have to update your label. So LBL heads rolled so I've updated whether it was a heads or a tail, and I've shown it on my form. So if you run your program, and we already know it's going to show us the bird because we haven't randomized yet, and it's the bird, so the computer won because we got it wrong, and you can see my labels are too big. So I need to go back out here, and I'll just control click each of my labels so I can do them all at once. Go to my properties, go to my font, and just choose a slightly smaller font. And try it again, and it's still not fitting. Could make my picture a little smaller. Oh, I believe I did this wrong. Equals what did I have here? Tails rolled. So this will be tails rolled concatenated with that. And here I'll have to say heads rolled concatenated with that, and then I should be good. Okay, so there we go. Tails rolled is 1, computer wins is 1. So far it's working good for clicking the head. The tails code will be almost exactly the same. And so go ahead, copy, paste, and modify. After copying and pasting, I just had to do 3 changes. I had to make the heads not visible because now I've clicked on tails. And then I had to swap show loser and show winner, and then it works fine. So if you run it, you click tails, and we know we're getting a tail because that's what the randomize is doing right now. The player wins because they're the same, and the number of tails rolled went up by 1. So far it's working fine. So when we run our program, and let's say we played the game, and now what? I mean, usually we don't go to all this work just to play the game once and have the program quit. So probably after a specific length of time, we would like it to start over. So you could have a reset button, click reset, or we could just have a timer. And I'm going to go with the timer because I don't like clicking lots of buttons. So I'm going to add a timer, and I'm going to name it TMR Restart or whatever. And the enabled is false, and we have to decide how long you want to sit there looking at your statistics or your win. So what, 3 seconds maybe? So 3 seconds would be 3,000 milliseconds. We need to code this timer. So what do we code in it? Well, if you run your game, let's have a look, and we clicked heads, what do we need to put in that timer? Well, I think we need to have... So what we're going to do is we're going to make both heads visible, and we can make both visible. It doesn't matter which one's gone. In our timer, we can make them both visible. And this one we're going to remove the picture from, not affect the invisibility. So in the timer, we're going to make both choices visible, and we are going to remove the image from the pick toss. So go ahead and do that. And this is how you do that. I made both of them visible, and I removed the picture from the pick toss. And the last thing, or actually the first thing I want to do is shut the timer off. I'm going to say stop. And when do I turn it on? As soon as you make your heads or tails choice, you're going to turn that timer on. So right here, turn on timer, I'll say the restart timer. So TMR restart dot, we can say start. We may have to say enabled equals true. We'll find out. And the same thing here. So I'm going to run it, and 1, 2, 3, and there we go. It seems to be working. Okay, so let's play the game. So tails, 1, 2, 3. Click tails again. Player wins 2. Tails rolled twice. Tails again. Oh, not getting any heads being rolled. So there could be a problem with my random number code. The other thing that's happening here is someone mentioned I can keep clicking this coin, and that's not a good thing, so we'll just quickly deal with that in a second here. And I am getting both, so that's good. So I guess what you want to do here, as soon as you click tails, okay, we want to disable further clicking. So you say pick tails dot enabled equals false. So if I click tails, I can't keep clicking it. Now if I do that, I'm going to have to make sure to turn that back on in my timer. Pick tails dot enabled equals true. And I'm going to do the same thing for heads. So pick tails dot enabled equals true. Turn them back on. So if I click heads here, disable further clicking, pick heads dot enabled equals false. Alright, so that'll keep me from continuously clicking the head and altering my statistics. Okay, so I think we're close to being done. One last thing. Notice I'm getting tails and tails and tails and tails. So we want to keep playing to see if we ever get a heads, because there could be something wrong with our formula. Okay, so we do get heads. Last of all, when your program's working perfectly fine, you want to go to your form load. Remember that your form load runs when you run your program. And here, and only here, do I want you to put a randomize. And that will change the sequence of heads and tails that you're getting. So, and I could speed up my timer so this doesn't take all day. And there we go. I got ahead the third time instead of the sixth or seventh time. And I believe something is missing from my random number formula. Everybody, you need to add an int here. That's why it's not working perfectly. It needs to have an int here. In both places. Okay, now it'll work. And I believe our game is done. Because if you noticed before, sometimes when I clicked it, I got nothing. So once in a while it was coming up with a 2, which it should not. It should only get a 0 or a 1. I forgot the int. We need that int there. If you don't put the int in, eventually you'll have an off by 1 error. And that is our game of heads and tails. The only thing I would add to this to make it perfect would be to make a little icon of a coin and put it up here in our program. And get rid of this line from my picture. But that's all we have time for today. Heads or tails? Next, go ahead and try rock, paper, scissors.